One of the features we're kicking off at Irish Breakdown is a Notre Dame Football 101. This is going to be a series of videos that we do from time to time, diving into the film of Notre Dame football. And in some cases, breaking down things that you might be hearing, phrases that we might use a lot when it comes to personnel, when it comes to things like field versus boundary, viper end, big end, things along those lines, where we can really go and give you a greater understanding, hopefully, of what we're talking about, but also a greater understanding, more importantly, of Notre Dame football. And so I want to kick it off by taking a look at Notre Dame's base defense under Marcus Freeman. Now, we've broken down Marcus Freeman's Cincinnati defense before, and we'll have plenty of things that we'll do in the fall when we actually get a chance to see the Notre Dame defense under Marcus Freeman to really explain what they're doing. But talking to different sources, we have a kind of an idea of what Notre Dame is going to be doing in its base defense. Now, of course, Marcus Freeman is going to be a very versatile coach. We're going to see a lot of three-man fronts, four-man fronts. They're going to mix up their coverages, mix up their looks. But from a base terminology, we have an understanding of what they're going to do based on talking to sources, but then also things that Coach Freeman and Mike Elson said on National Signing Day. So what I want to do in this session of the film room of the Notre Dame Football 101 is I want to dive a little bit into just what the base defense is going to look like at Notre Dame when they go to their 4-2-5. So you'll have this as a reference. So when you're listening to us talk about different aspects of the team, you'll have a greater understanding of what we're talking about. So I want to begin by just showing you a little bit about what the Notre Dame defense is going to look like in its base 4-2-5 alignment. Now, this is Notre Dame last year against Clemson, and so we're going to use that as a reference point to be able to show you what we're talking about and give you some terminology of what Notre Dame is going to be doing on defense. So to begin, Notre Dame is going to be a field boundary defense against most teams. If they play teams that go up tempo, then they'll go left, right. I'm going to follow this up with a field boundary Notre Dame Football 101, doing a greater analysis of what that means. But for now, let's just stick to sort of the base alignments and the base personnel. And we'll start with the defensive line. This is called the big end. We've used the term strong side end before. Notre Dame has used that term before. Field boundary doesn't always mean the big end is going to line up to the strong side of the formation, so it's not as applicable. They call it a big end. You can see that's this player here. He will be a field player first and foremost. He has to be a big, strong, physical player, has to be good against the run. At times, he will even line up as a 3 technique when they go to their 3-down looks, and we'll dive into that down the road. This is the defensive tackle. He is going to line up in a 3 technique. We'll show you a little bit about what that looks like here. You get a better understanding of what the defense is going to look like up front. That's the big end. This is the defensive tackle. He is going to line up often in a 3 technique, field or boundary. A 3 technique is essentially the outside shoulder of the guard, as you can see here. This is the nose guard. He will line up over the center at times. Here he is in a 1 technique. Some people will call this a 2-eye. I call it a 1 technique. That is the inside shoulder of the guard. These are both have bigger guys. The defensive tackle, however, is going to more often than not be a penetrator, a guy that is looking to make more plays on the ball. They like a more athletic player and a more disruptive player. If you can find a disruptive nose guard, that's great. But in an ideal situation, that's got to be a big space eater type of player. This is the viper end. Now, Mike Elson said that this will remain a 2-point stance. A 2-point stance means he's just got 2 parts of his body in the ground. His hands are up, as you can see here. This guy is actually in a 4-point stance, will often be in a 3-point stance. Essentially, if you have 2 feet and 1 hand in the ground, you're in a 3-point stance. If you just have 2 feet, you're in a 2-point stance. If you have 2 feet and 2 hands, you're in a 4-point stance. It's not that complicated. Viper end is a guy that has to be physical against the run. He has to be a good pass rusher, but he also has to be athletic, and he's going to drop into coverage. So that's what that looks like up front. Now let's look at the linebacker level. This is the will linebacker. Notre Dame used to call this the buck linebacker. It will now be the will linebacker. He is a boundary player, weak side. Will also can be referred to as weak side. This is the Mike linebacker. That is the middle linebacker. We'll show you again what that looks like from the wide. In this instance, the will linebacker is actually lined up over the center. You will see that at times, and the Mike linebacker is actually stacked over here. This is what Notre Dame showed. I haven't seen quite as much of this at Cincinnati, but you will see it. More often than not, the will linebacker is going to be weak side boundary. He'll be in the B gap here. Sometimes he'll be in the A gap. Sometimes he'll walk up off the edge. Sometimes he'll be outside covering a slot defender. So in this instance, if Clemson had a defender over here, you'll see the will bump out, play in the slot, and be able to cover that. He has to be a rangy, athletic player. He has to be able to cover. He has to be able to play the run between the tackles. And ideally, you'd like a guy that can also blitz the quarterback. The Mike linebacker is more of a between the tackles type of player. He has to be athletic and he has to be rangy enough to play off tackle and cover backs and cover tight ends. But this is a guy that has to be a good run defender. And I think, like I said, we'll see more of that guy playing. Let's look at it from the tight. You'll see more from what I've seen on Marcus Freeman's defense on film. This Mike linebacker will be in this area a lot more often, playing downhill, really being aggressive, really being proactive. The rover is an interesting one. So Marcus Freeman said they will continue to keep the rover in this defense in the terminology. Now, whether or not that's going to be a third linebacker like Notre Dame has used in the past, or whether or not that's going to be more of a big safety, I think is going to be determined by the personnel. However, you will see the rover lined up outside of the slot a lot. He will come up off the edge at times, but from what I've seen in Marcus Freeman's defense, he will also be stacked at times, but you could also see scenarios where Notre Dame is going to sort of go to almost a 3-4 personnel where you'll either have the Viper, if it's an athletic enough player, playing in this off the ball with 3 linebackers inside and 3 defensive linemen, and the rover can stay outside, or you can just bring in a third linebacker, keep the rover there. The rover can also go inside, and you can bring in a third safety. So there's a lot of versatility that they can do with this position. But you have to be good in space. You have to be good against the run, coming up, taking on blocks. If you can blitz, that's great. But the big key is this player, whether he's a linebacker body or a safety body, has to be able to cover. If you can't cover, you're not going to be a good rover in this defense. Let's now finish up by looking at the secondary, the third level of the defense. This is the boundary corner. This is usually a longer, more physical press defender. Here, Nick McLeod is playing press coverage for Notre Dame. Notre Dame didn't do a lot of press coverage, and I believe on the snap, he actually bailed at the snap. At Cincinnati, they played a lot more man coverage than we saw from Notre Dame, especially this past season. And this guy's going to press and play press. He has to be a good covered player. He's going to be one-on-one a lot in this defense. So you need a really, really strong cover player there. Cincinnati's best cornerback, Ahmed Gardner, was their boundary corner. And this is the field corner. This guy has to be rangy. He has to be a good cover player. He's got to play, as you can see, he's got a lot more ground to cover playing to the field than the boundary corner does. However, they will also do a lot more where they'll protect him with the field safety. This is the field safety. Field safety means he's going to line up to the field side, and the boundary safety will line up into the boundary. And again, I'll have a video breaking that down. But the field corner will play. You might see more zone out of this, but from what I've seen from Cincinnati, he will come up and press as well in an attempt to take away a lot of the quick game, force the quarterback to look further down the field, which then obviously allows the pass rush to go. So I think at the safety level, we have to understand that they will go field boundary. From what I've seen, the field safety will do more of the dropping to the middle of the field, with the boundary safety kind of coming down and playing robber, playing cover 1, playing cover 3, with a lot of single high safety looks. There are times where they'll both kind of play the alleys. They'll play more cover 4 or cover 2, which we'll eventually get into. So they'll mix up their looks. Now, I want to explain something here too, and again, I'll dive into this a little bit more in the field boundary conversation, but there will be times where they will just say, hey, we're playing left-right, which means, Nick McLeod here, if he's the left cornerback, if the ball's now over here, what Notre Dame would do now as field boundary is they would flip corners, right? But against tempo teams, you won't have time to do that, so they'll just play left-right. So if the ball's here, then this guy will still stay on the right, and he'll stay on the left. So you have to be able to play field and boundary. So it's a lot harder in this defense to have a guy that can only play one of those spots. If you have a boundary corner that's not playing very well to the field, you have to think about finding a guy that can do both. And same thing here. But Obviously, they can tailor that if they don't have players who can do both, but that's ideally what you're looking to recruit is players who are versatile enough to really play both of these spots and both of these spots. That's the ideal situation for the Notre Dame defense. So that is a little bit of a look into the base defense for Notre Dame. We'll have a lot more as we kind of dive through this, and especially as we get into the season. If you have ideas on things you're curious about, and you'd like to have us explain, we've gotten already some great comments so far. The base defense one is one we started off with, but the field boundary video, which is going to come next, so look for that, was something that was made by request. People wanting to understand the difference between field boundary. So if there's things you'd like us to discuss, concepts you'd like us to show, terms that maybe you want to learn more about, just leave a comment on the YouTube channel, leave a comment on our irishbreakdown.com page, hit me up on Twitter. You can hit me up on our Facebook group, the Irish Breakdown fan group page. A lot of ways that you can reach me to let us know these things. We want to hear what you want to learn more about. Ultimately, our goal is to make you as knowledgeable of a Notre Dame fan as possible, not just about the team, but also about the game. I really think it's going to help you watch the game better, differently, and I think will make you enjoy the game a little bit better because you'll be able to start identifying certain things. So hopefully this is a good intro and you enjoy this Football 101. Let us know any topics, like I said, you would like to hear us talk about. Make sure you are subscribed to our channel. Hit the notification button. Check out irishbreakdown.com on a daily basis. You can always sign up for our free newsletter so you get all of our stories in your mailbox in the morning. And, of course, subscribe to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back with you again soon.